Spears putting the ball on a play. He gets it out deep, and Havlicek steals it over the fence wall. Havlicek stole the ball. It's all over. It's all over.
Larry, fake, fall away. Hits it at the buzzer. All right. Here's Michael at the foul line. A shot on Elo. Good. The Bulls win. They win it.
Holding Court with Dee4three.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 2 of the Holding Court podcast with Dee4three for the love of the game and its history. Super excited to have one of my good friends here, SwaggyPlino. He's a hardcore basketball fan since 1991. Also, a gifted basketball gamer who's been doing it for a long time and helping out and following along with the NBA Live series. SwaggyPlino, welcome to the show.
Man, my man D, I appreciate being here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. And in fact, I heard that most podcasts stop after episode 1 because people give up. So the fact that I even made it to episode 2, I feel pretty good about that. So, you know, positivity moving forward, right?
Absolutely. And I've been excited for this. I'm happy that you're doing this. We talked about this literally a year ago, and for you to embark upon this process means the world to me. I genuinely wish you the best. And I really hope that this podcast continues because we all need this right now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You know, we both love hoop. We've both been following it for about the same amount of time. So what a better way to talk about it and share it than, you know, on a podcast. So I think this is great. And I hope you come on again. SwaggyPlino actually has a story about his brother who made a clutch shot in the 2006 NCAA tournament in the Sweet 16. So why don't you share that story with us?
Absolutely. My younger brother, Kenton Paulino, who played for the University of Texas, participated in Sweet 16 game against West Virginia, which was a true grind out type of game. And it came down to the last literally 5 seconds, in which Rick Barnes, who was the head coach at the time, going against Joe, I can't remember his name, but he's a popular coach actually for West Virginia. Kevin Pisnockel hit a 3-point shot, and there was 5 seconds left, no timeout call.
He hits it with 5 seconds left. Now it's Texas hurrying to the other end. Abrams, Paulino to win it. Oh! Texas wins on a last-second shot by Kenton Paulino.
And without calling a timeout, the smart play by Rick Barnes, because he's going against a defense that's scrambling and not set. Abrams draws the defense, and Paulino, he did get it off with plenty of time. Texas wins.
Kenton Paulino, quiet offensively most of the game. Watch the clock and the light. And Paulino definitely out of the hand with about 0.8 of a second to go. In fact, ball almost going through the basket as time expired.
My brother wanted the ball, so the freshman point guard, Abrams, passed him the ball at the wing. He took the shot with a hurt knee, and it went in at the buzzer. It's the highlight of his career, and one of the highlight moments of my life to see him embark upon that responsibility. And it was words cannot express the amount of joy I felt witnessing that in that moment. Just absolutely fantastic. The moment we all dream of, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, hitting the buzzer. Then my brother had that moment, and now he's an outstanding coach. He's been all over the NCAA scene as assistant coach, and currently he's at the University of Texas, El Paso. We hope that we get a season this year.
Yeah, I just want to say, like you said, that's the shot that you practice in your driveway and you pretend to hit over and over and over again. I can't even tell you how many buzzer shots I hit and miss in my driveway just making up a scenario like that in my head. And I love that he stuck with the game after college as well. Like you said, that he's a gifted coach as well and still a student of the game. I love stories like that. I honestly, I have two brothers that I'm incredibly close with. We're all really close in age, as you know. And I'm proud of them for every little thing that they've ever done. And everything they do means the world to me. So I can only imagine what my reaction would have been if one of my brothers made a shot like that. That's out of this world.
Oh, yeah. It was an explosion of joy, which I cannot bear into words, to witness that. And thank you for allowing me to share that, for sure.
No, absolutely. So a quick summary of what we're going to be going over here. The name of this episode is Doncic, Celtics, and Lakers, oh my. And we're going to be going over Luka Doncic and his recent Game 4 performance over on the Clippers, why he's been so successful in the NBA up to this point. And we'll go over some quotes that he made when he first came in to the league in an interview with Movie Star Plus, which is a Spanish network. We'll also be going over the Celtics, who just swept the 76ers, and their chances against the Raptors and what they need to do to take the Raptors out in that series. And we'll be going over the Lakers as well and what it's going to take for them to continue the road to the finals and try to get that title, that elusive title. And then we'll be going over a mailbag, answering questions from you, the fans, and then the worst Twitter takes of the week. So first discussion is going to be on Luka Doncic and why he is so successful in the NBA at this point. And he had a recent performance in Game 4 against the Clippers, 43 points, 17 rebounds, 13 assists, 58% from the field, 4 for 10 threes, 40%. He made the dagger three over Reggie Jackson off of a switch. Kawhi Leonard was originally supposed to be guarding him. Again, the NBA switches everything nowadays, which I'll never understand. And former NBA player Antonio Daniels came out with a tweet and said that. He goes, why do they switch everything? Like, it doesn't make any sense. But it put Reggie Jackson, who's much smaller, on an island with Luka Doncic. And Doncic just stepped back, shot it right over Jackson like it was nothing. And Dallas won that game. So first off, why in the NBA now do they switch everything?
Well, my brother and I had a very deep conversation about this when we noticed this trend taking its course into the NBA, which in my opinion has received a lot of influence from the EuroLeagues upon its style of play. And we'll talk about that when we discuss Luka Doncic and his success. But my brother says the NBA players of today are versatile, more versatile than they were in the past, in his opinion, in which you have power forwards to the point guard having the capacity to do the same thing. They're all very effective out on the perimeter. They all have the capacity to put the ball on the floor and drive the lane instead of playing your standard 3-32 setup, where you have a wing, the point guard in the middle, and two guys down low. He said you have to literally pick your poison, and there are times in which it's absolutely inevitable for you to maintain consistency on the defensive end with one particular player because of, from 1 to 4, actually now at times 1 to 5, having the capacity to put the ball on the floor, to spread the floor, and to even make jump shots, layups, dunks, whatever you want. So switching everything has become the norm, and sometimes it appears lazy, as if coaches are not trying to implement defensive strategy, but they are. As you can see, there are advanced switching, there's pre-switching, delayed switching. So there is a science to it. However, when it's poorly executed, you get games in which Luka Doncic takes full advantage, as you have mentioned. So I don't agree with the idea of switching, but when it is executed wisely, it can be very effective in stopping offensive schemes in which you have all 5 of the players literally doing the same thing. What's your take on that, Dee?
I have a problem with the 1 through 5. Everybody's versatile. I can point to a bunch of big men and a bunch of centers in the NBA now that you never want putting the ball on the floor.
Absolutely.
Right? The Steven Adams of the world, right?
Right.
You know, the DeAndre Jordans of the world. Jokic is slow off the perimeter as well. You have to stay glued to him because he can, you know, hit the outside shot and can hit in the mid range as well. But I have a problem saying that it's all based on that. And one of the things, as an example, if you remember correctly, a few years back, Steven Adams constantly getting caught on an island with Steph Curry.
Mm-hmm.
And Steph Curry continued to effortlessly get that switch. Like, there was no enhanced effort whatsoever by the Thunder to prevent that switch. And Steven Adams would end up on the perimeter trying to guard Steph Curry, and Steph Curry would just light him up over and over and over again. And at one point, it looked like that alone was going to be the Thunder's demise, right? Switching big men out onto Curry, boom, Curry dominates. So I can come up with a lot of examples where 1 through 5, it isn't that way. Also, in this case, this is a point guard and a small forward. So this is Reggie Jackson and Kawhi Leonard. There were no big men involved in this. This is a situation where, in my opinion, the Clippers should have found a way to say, hey, you know what? They're going to try to switch this. Kawhi, you have to stay glued to Luka no matter what. But like I said, they switch everything, and it left Doncic on an island. And that was the Clippers' demise in that game, was that switch.
Yeah, I have to agree with that take. Well, and it sounds as if it's effortless, right? It sounds like it's just a lazy, irrational approach to switch everything. But there is a way in which it can be done. And Popovich did this phenomenally against Houston when they played in the playoff series, I believe 4 years ago. I can't remember the year exactly. But what he did, because, you know, James Harden in games 1 and 2 lit him up. I mean, went off for 40 at one point, almost close to 50 points. What he did was just have the big man protect the paint. So instead of, and having the wings switch out. So instead of having them switch everything, they just allowed James Harden to come to the basket, and the big man was always there to meet him at the basket. And it frustrated him, and you know, the Spurs ended up winning that series. But you need to have a big man. You need to have someone there to protect the paint, someone there to contest the basket at all costs. And that's the challenge that these coaches meet in today's game, on how they can do so and be effective defensively, but also remain relevant on the offensive end as well. So it is a challenge, but I agree with your take as to what you're saying about the situation that led to the Clippers' demise. 100%.
And I agree 100%. I think that it's why I get so frustrated when I watch Joel Embiid out on the 3-point line. It's why I get so frustrated when he should be on defense too. He should be more of a paint protector and clogging the paint. And I see him favoring, a perimeter, guarding too close out on the perimeter. Not guarding anywhere near the paint or the block, which what does that end up doing? That allows free layups for the other team, or single contested layups by a smaller rim protector.
Right.
So absolutely. I think that Harden is going to do it again this year. They sorely need Russell Westbrook, in my opinion. If you remember correctly, he took over this team for a few months during the season. He was the best Rocket. He kept the pedal on. He was dominating in many different ways. He was knocking down threes for a while. He was hitting his mid-range shot. He was putting pressure on the defense. I think that Russell Westbrook could be the difference that gets them over the hump if he comes back healthy and ready to go. But at the same time, I think that they're ramping up their 3-point barrage even more, and they continue year in and year out to shoot themselves out of the playoffs, and they're continuing with a proven losing formula.
Right.
And what I see happening is them shooting 50 to 60 threes per game, maybe taking a couple games in the later rounds, and that's if they get out of the first round, and basically shooting themselves again out of a series. They're going to have one of the, a couple of those games where they shoot 20 to 25% from the 3-point line. causing, long rebounds and fast breaks and easy opportunities for the other team. And in my opinion, just like with that Spurs situation, I see the Rockets getting eliminated.
I have to agree. They say you live by the three or die by the three, and it's just crazy how it's a feast or famine type of offensive system. You have a high reward and high penalty by executing your offense that way. And in my opinion, it just doesn't look fun. It's not intriguing. It doesn't, trigger my interest when I see, players literally just come down and take 3-point shots. I would rather look to see a more profound mix of strategy, talent, skill, being exhibited out there on the court, because it is the easiest shot that is made available. And according to a lot of coaches, they said it's the first shot that most, children work on. They don't go to the free throw line. They don't work on their mid-range. They go out there and shoot hundreds of threes.
Especially now. Especially now. That's what they see their idols doing. That's what they see promoted. Right. Yeah. And we're going to get to that in a second with Doncic. Right. But, the other part, before we leave the Rockets conversation, nothing frustrates me more than, and it's even worse than the shot selection sometimes for me, is watching 2 or 3, sometimes 4 Rockets spread out on the floor just standing there. While Harden dribble fits at the top of the key. And I'm looking at PJ Tucker standing in the corner where he is a good 3-point shooter from the corner. You have Austin Rivers standing in the corner. You have, when Russell Westbrook is on the floor, he's the last person you want to just be standing there, standing in a corner. And I'm watching this, and I'm watching them dribble down the shot clock and Harden do a bunch of these unnecessary dribbles that only waste his energy. And everybody's standing on the corners. How does anybody get in a rhythm? How do you get in a rhythm when you don't touch the ball? Exactly right. You don't. You don't. And as a result of you getting an opportunity, it goes awry, unfortunately. And that's the famine part of the offense, where you have one guy who's primarily the ball handler, consuming most of that time with possession of the basketball, instead of spreading the ball around, moving the ball around, like, in my opinion, like the Utah Jazz of the 90s. As much as I hated them at being a Laker fan, I love the way they spread the ball. They were so fun to watch. Anybody that says watching the Utah Jazz, anybody that says that that's watching boring basketball, if they call that boring basketball, in my opinion, they don't love basketball. No, exactly. I mean, it was just well done, and it was based on pick and roll and driving and dishing. And Mike D'Antoni does have a science to his offense when it works well. He does implement the pick and roll very well, and does it in a variety of ways. But at its worst, it's exactly what you've mentioned, just dribbling out and hoping for one person to take off and everyone else to follow. And usually that doesn't lead to championship basketball. Well, I hate when I hear comparisons between this Rockets team to the D'Antoni Suns teams, because yes, those teams were 7 seconds or less, but their offense was still predicated on quick ball movement, the attack of the inside, as opposed to 45, 50 threes per game being attempted, sometimes 60 now for the Rockets. The Suns were only attempting 24 per game. Absolutely. They had that inside attack with Sean Marion and Amari Stoudemire, always rolling to the hoop, always cutting. When you watch the Suns play basketball in the mid-2000s, it is absolutely beautiful. When you watch the Rockets play basketball now, you want to rip out your hair. I can't watch them from at times. It's intolerable, and I hope I don't sound too harsh, but literally, at its worst, you'd rather watch something else, because anyone can go out there and spread the floor and have people jack up threes. I mean, in my opinion, that's playground basketball. What you have with the Suns was D'Antoni and the Suns was strategic basketball on both ends of the court that really gave the Lakers headaches. I mean, they had me worried when they played against them in the playoffs because they were that efficient. They had the potential to do great things down there. But unfortunately, there's still bits and pieces to his game that needs some work, apparently. And
that's the part he's yet to find in his recipe.
I mean, with Harden, it's more playing the refs instead of playing basketball, right? If you're gonna pout constantly, if you're gonna flail your arms and you're gonna play that way consistently, what's gonna end up happening is the refs are going to probably get sick of you. And honestly, it's very likely that you're not going to get those calls because you're constantly, you're flailing, you're flopping. And if you noticed, he doesn't get those same calls in the playoffs. And then he has to resort again to, that poor shot selection where he's not attacking as much, where he's taking contested threes from the top of the key.
Because he's fatigued. He's tired.
He's right? And what's an easier shot to take than a quick pull-up three, right?
Right.
So the other point, too, before we move on to Doncic again, is they got rid of Clint Capella. They got rid of Nene. They have a way past his prime at the end of his ropes in a basketball case. He's not going to die. Don't worry, anybody. Tyson Chandler rotting away on the bench. And they've gone with a 6'5" center. And I remember growing up, and, you'd always hear about in the 90s and 2000s, teams preparing their team to take out the contender, right? To match up with the contender. You know why the Bulls wanted Luke Longley? Because they knew that Luke Longley could bang with Shaq, right? So what teams did is they built themselves in order to compete with the best. The Rockets what they've done is the best team in the West is the Los Angeles Lakers. I believe they led the league in blocks during the season. Their interior size, there is absolutely nothing that the Rockets can do in the playoffs to compete with that. They can't disrupt it. Anthony Davis is just going to completely go off. Teams have already been going off on that interior defense on the Rockets. And, when we return to the bubble, and what happened to preparing for your opponent? What happened to getting the right matchups and understanding that you need to match up well with your opponent to win?
Unfortunately, the influence of the Golden State Warriors and their championship run was extraordinarily influential in determining the style of basketball Houston wanted to play. Remember, Houston lost to them. And they had an outstanding year when that occurred. So they tried to formulate a system that would be very similar to the Warriors, but they stuck to it. They did not adapt. They did not find ways to prepare for what they're seeing right now. Right,
but the Warriors, and you'll agree with this, the Warriors played great, versatile defense.
Yes, they did.
Good defense, especially when they had Kevin Durant, who was incredibly versatile, could guard multiple positions, was a disruptor flying around the rim. And they even had, for their first title, they had Andrew Bogut. They had Zaza Pachulia. So, you know what? People want to call Zaza Pachulia a stiff, but he was a real pain in the box for opponents. Yes. Not just as a screen setter, as somebody taking up space, but as a disruptor at the rim and as an annoyance. He was annoying. And even for teams in the past, like the Heat, when they won, Joel Anthony coming off the bench was annoying. He was a big guy that came in and he would block shots. He would be in your face. He would be disrupting, etc. So I don't see it. PJ Tucker is 6'5". They don't have enough size, in my opinion, to contend with the Lakers bigs. And honestly, I don't think that they're going to compete well in that series if they face them.
They're not. And you mentioned their greatest weakness by far is that lack of intensity. That one bulldog in the locker room to kind of motivate the players to do more than what they've been assigned. And you know what? Honestly, Patrick Beverley, although small, had that type of mindset with Houston, at the very least in consideration, a defensive mind, a competitive mind, someone who's always in your face looking to irritate the opponent.
The Chris Childs type from the Knicks.
Yes.
Yeah, the 1-2 piece on Kobe. Like,
right.
You taking the floor, knowing, if somebody messes with me, I'm going to knock them out. Like that type of personality.
Correct. And unfortunately, you just don't see that with anyone on that lineup with Houston. You can't name one player who have that type of edge or who is willing to take that role.
Westbrook does. Westbrook does, and that's why he's one of my favorite players in the NBA. But the problem is that Westbrook is a sometimes defender.
Yeah.
Westbrook is high motor, incredibly high motor on offense, but I think that he's not as gifted on the defensive end.
Correct. And you're right. Russell Westbrook does have that mindset, but like I said, it's not, in my opinion, consistent. It's based upon how he's feeling and how he's performing out there on the floor. So if he's doing well, yeah, he's that engine, he's that motor. But if he's not doing so well, he brings the whole team down because he tends to blame others, unfortunately, at the same time blaming himself. And that leads to poor results out there on the court, especially when you're trying to bring the troops together to complete an objective. But no matter what the state was for Patrick Beverley, they could be down 15. He would still consistently try to find a way to get in your face. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I agree 100%. I think Russ's shot selection is going to be one of the keys.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Back. It's not those, the contested long twos and whatnot. It's him, being able to keep that energy, keep that motor, and actually putting pressure on the defense. So yeah, let's get into Doncic and finish that discussion. So last year, he had an interview with Spanish Network movie star, and this is taken from the Washington Post, and he had stated, here in the NBA, it's easier to score compared to Europe. Of course. In Europe, the court is smaller, and here there is the 3 seconds rule. I think it's easier to score here. Ricky Rubio, also in 2012, stated, it's basketball. So in the end of the day, it's the same thing. But over here, maybe you can run more. There are more spaces because there is a defensive 3-second zone. And it's easy to play here because of all the spaces you have. And they can't be more than 3 seconds in the zone so that it looks easier going to the rim. And there's another player who also had a numbers jump. So I wanted to go over a couple points with Doncic. So Doncic attributed the scoring boost to some of the rules that make the NBA game more offense friendly, but also to the larger court in American basketball. The NBA uses courts that are 94 feet by 50 feet or 4,700 square feet. European teams play on FIBA regulation courts that are 91.86 feet by 49.21 feet or 4,520.43 square feet. So he also stated those extra 180 square feet really makes a difference. But I think there's more to it than that, Swag, and I think you would agree. I think one of the biggest differences is it seems like there's a little bit lower of an effort level, especially in the regular season in the NBA on the defensive end. But there's also the defensive rules, which are basically the defense in the NBA is handicapped by the rules. Obviously, we've talked about how there's no hand checking on the perimeter, but it's gotten to the point where you have to be almost completely hands off of the offensive player, even when they're taking it to the rim. And what ends up happening in that case is it allows a gentleman like Luka, who isn't athletically gifted. He doesn't have the great speed. He doesn't have the great leaping ability. He's not super strong. All of this, it allows him to basically do whatever he wants. When he has the ball. He can move where he wants on the floor. He can get into the spaces that he wants on the floor. And he is a bigger point guard. Normally when he's going up on somebody in the paint, they're either equal in size to him or sometimes smaller. So I wanted to get your take on, Doncic's comments of, being easier, to score here than in Europe.
Absolutely. And not to mention about the rim rules in Europe. You can literally tip the ball off the basketball while it's hovering on top of the perimeter of the rim or the radius of the rim. Whereas in the NBA, you have to wait till it's literally outside of the circumference of the rim. There's multiple challenges there. in scoring in in EuroLeague basketball or in overseas basketball. And my brother played overseas for Turkey. And one thing that we also forgot to mention, and my brother loved this experience in Turkey, was how passionate, remember this, how passionate the fans are about their team.
Sometimes you don't even notice the fans are there in the NBA now.
Correct. Well, it's the totally
well, in the bubble, yeah. I mean, obviously, but I mean, like when you're in an actual NBA arena, we've talked about this. We've talked about not only the better presentation in the past, NBA on NBC and whatnot, and the better commentary from the likes of Doug Collins and Doug Collins and Mike Fratello, how they really analyzed the game and broke it down and gave fans a lot more information than the announcers do in today's game. As well, but the atmosphere, I just watched, and that's one of the feature series. I just watched the 1990 1 Game 5 Celtics versus Pacers first round game, and it's in the Boston Garden. And I'm just going to tell you something: how exciting of a game was that to watch? The fans were so into it; they were screaming on every play. They're up on their feet. Man, I miss it.
Correct, and that fan reaction, that trust, literally influenced the players out there on the floor. And that's what you will experience in overseas basketball. Well, during the times where we, were able to attend games, there's a sense of pride. There's a sense of responsibility to go out there and perform for these fans who are literally jumping like they're at a soccer match, banging their drums the whole time. So, Doncic experienced that. And the players played passionately as well. A lot of people look at Euro basketball and overseas basketball and don't believe that it's physical. Oh, it's physical. And they're downright dirty at times. They're out there throwing elbows. One time, my brother, he was doing very well in this game in which he played with Turkey. And this player literally laid him out when he attacked the basket, and it's that level of competitiveness that prepares young players like the Brandon Jennings, the Tony Parkers, and now Luka, even Dirk Nowitzki, that primed them to remain composed during prime situations. And of course, the dimensions that you've mentioned is extraordinarily influential, making it very easy for Luka to take advantage of the space on the floor and to utilize his IQ that he's developed from young. Because in Euro basketball or overseas basketball, let me just say overseas basketball, you have to have some level of intelligence to know when to attack the basketball, when to pass the ball, when to find a cutter, when to take a shot.
His experience, sorry to interrupt you, his experience in development is ahead. Because he was playing pro players as a young teenager.
Correct. And it also is a commentary upon the American style of basketball. You know what I mean? When you do that compare and contrast, you can see how overseas basketball better prepares younger players for elite competition on any level versus our collegiate, level of basketball that we have here. That's because young players are playing with, like you said, grown adults. There is no barrier there. And they are met with that same level of intensity, that same level of competition. So with Luka being primed and built under that system, coming into the NBA was no more than a hop, skip, and a jump for him. And remember the key, the paint is much larger overseas than it is here in the NBA. So he has to deal with big men whenever he attacks the basket, more so, like you've mentioned, that in comparison to what he's experiencing in the NBA. He knows that all I have to do is hold this ball up, and that big man who's flashing in the paint has to move, and when he's moving, I am good to go. Not the case in the case overseas.
Are you sure? Are you sure you just woke up from a nap because you're on fire?
I know, right? You know what the basketball does for us. It brings us together, and it brings life to us all. When we talk about the pure beauty of the sport, and we're talking about the international game. It is a beautiful game that brings all members from all walks of life to come and display their talent. And I'm actually happy to see Luka doing what he's doing in the league today. It's just a beautiful thing to witness, and it's a testament to know that wherever you are in this world, you can do something absolutely spectacular with yourself if you put your mind to it.
Yeah, I think, it's not all sunshine and rainbows either. I've talked about this before, and I sent a tweet out about it. For every Dirk Nowitzki and Luka Doncic, you have a Darko Milicic and a Dragon Bender. So
there you go.
it doesn't always work out. But I think that Doncic did have a little bit of a leg up on the competition. I think that he might be tougher than a lot of the league today, even just as a young rookie. He's only 21 years old. He's born in February. So he doesn't turn 22 until the beginning of next year, right. Which is wild to think about. So a couple more notes on that. Doncic averaged 14.5 points in the last of his 4 seasons for Real Madrid before entering the NBA draft in June. Since arriving in Dallas, so at the time of this article, he's averaging 20.6 points and has seen an increase in his three-point percentage from 30.9 to 34.9. That actually went down to 32.7. And we're going to get into the three-point shooting in a second before we end this discussion about Doncic. He averaged 21.2 points in his rookie season and 28.8 points already in his second season at the age of 21 years old. And again, my concern with that is, the level of competition, intensity, the level of defense in the NBA. And I think that there should be more light shined upon that. I think the rules have absolutely hurt it. I also think that money in the game has hurt it. I don't think that there's as many true competitors in the game anymore. And I think that veterans are also being pushed out, the hard-nosed veterans. You know what I mean? The ones who are going to give it to you on the court. So I think that there's a lot of different factors that go into that.
Yeah, and that's just the tip of the iceberg as to what you've mentioned. You're absolutely right. And that's a whole other podcast, really. As a result of money influx, free agency, the whole structure of the league, it makes you think if there should be some element of reconstruction there. At times, not all the time, but at times you can see that it's not there.
No, absolutely. I think the last note with Doncic too is, and to give you an idea, between games 14 and 37 playing for Real Madrid, he only had one game that he scored 20 points.
Wow.
That is wild. So that is that. I wanted to bring up one final point with Doncic, and I want to bring up Game 5 as an example of when he's at his worst. And I also want to point out that I think part of this is because of Rick Carlisle's style. He has talked recently, when questions got brought up, and Porzingis has been hurt. But he brought up Porzingis in this scenario and stated about, how the basically like the post game is dead. It's not efficient, or it's not the smart move anymore to dump it down into the big man. It was comments sort of around that idea. So Rick Carlisle has bought full into the new NBA scheme. Right. Yeah. The new NBA idea. So I wanted to talk about Game 5 really quick between the Clippers and the Mavericks. So this is so early in the first quarter, right away, step back 3 early in the shot clock over Zubac from Doncic, air ball. Next possession, turnover early in the shot clock, trying to feed Hardaway Jr. in the paint. This was with like 17 or 18 seconds left in the shot clock, which led to an easy Kawhi mid-range jumper on the other end, followed by another turnover, forcing the ball into Finney-Smith on a cut with 17 seconds left on the shot clock, which again led to a score on the other end, a Paul George three-pointer, followed by forcing up a shot with 18 seconds to go on the shot clock, which bricked, and asking for a foul in the process, followed by traveling on the very next possession. He finally gets a floater to fall, again, early in the shot clock, 18 seconds left on it, and screams and one. Clippers are up by 15 points at this point. He ends the third quarter with a 30 to 35 foot three that he dribbled into. He was just dribbling out the clock. Heavily contested by Paul George, bricks off the back of the rim. Clippers go up 41 to 22 at the end of the first, and the Mavericks never recovered. So Listen, I like when he gets aggressive with smaller guys. Like later in the game, or when Reggie Jackson was switched on to him, he called for the ball, went into the post, and dominated Reggie Jackson, or at least went at him to try to get a foul. I don't mind him attacking early in the shot clock on mismatches like that. But on Kawhi, on Paul George, two of the best defenders at times in the NBA, or even Mook, Marcus Morris, you need to be smarter about it. And if you're drawing a double team, same thing. You have to be smarter about it. So the other thing that kind of annoys me is the constant yelling of and one and complaining, even at the slightest bit of contact. I said this about Harden: play the game, not the refs. You're barely getting touched. Don't take yourself out of the game by playing the refs.
Right. Absolutely. Well, there you go, going into that hazy mixture where things just appear a little bit careless. And then you like you said, wow, I love what you brought up there. You got to recognize the matchups. You got to recognize when you have to be a little bit more strategic in your approach, when to be aggressive, when to fall back, knowing your spots to attack. And at times the game can seem a bit random because you're told, to go out there and score as quickly as possible, take advantage, and don't allow the defense to get set, and just go out there and score by any means. But you have to pay attention to detail. You have to pay attention to who you're going up against, and have, let's say, a skill that you can take advantage of, that you can rely on. And you don't see a lot of players doing that, then in the polls in the 90s where you would see players have a particular skill that they would go to reliably and take.
Right, you're not getting that with Maxi Kleber. Right.
No.
You're not getting that with Maxi Kleber. You're getting that either with Dwight Powell when he wasn't hurt, when he was actually playing, before he went down. You're not getting that person with that special skill set that you can rely on in the half court. But the solution to that isn't jacking up shots early in the shot clock or taking step back threes 30 to 35 feet from the basket. And when I see stuff like that happen, and I see Finney Smith and I see Tim Hardaway Jr., and they're just standing on the corners, and I see Doncic put up a shot like that with 17, 18, 19 seconds to go on the shot clock with no movement, I'm ripping my hair out. I'm like, how you just gave away a possession.
Absolutely. And also breaking the rhythm of building up your team to go out there cohesively and find a style of attack. Because some games it's not going to be, and that was a prime example of it there in the game we're discussing here about Luka. There's some games it's not going to be on you, and there's going to be times where you're going to have to be a distributor. There are going to be times where you're going to have to be a decoy, someone that is there as a threat, but being the one to facilitate a path for others to go off and shine. And you got to know in your mind when that is the case.
And that's why Bird and Magic were so great. That's why guys like it. That's why I don't like the comparison. Stop it. Stop doing that comparison. Listen, Bird and Magic were so great because they fueled everybody around them. They made everybody better around them. There wasn't this point of somebody not knowing their role or they're just standing there. You know what I mean? They fueled those teams. And, when you do that, you get higher efforts on the defensive end as well. Yeah. Because you've played basketball before. I've played basketball before too. How hard do you want to work on defense if you don't touch the ball on multiple possessions on offense? Correct.
There's no incentive.
Right.
And there's no incentive. And you can see that energy being translated on the court by other players. It's kind of like Shaquille O'Neal not getting the ball, not touching the basketball, or Kobe Bryant, or any other player in that matter. I mention these great players because I just want you to see the psychology that takes place with players when they know they're on a particular offensive possession, they're not going to touch the basketball. So where's the incentive to even run the floor?
Right.
Where's the incentive to even get to your spot? And you literally see players in transition jogging back instead of going all out looking for their potential opportunity because they know it's going to come. And that's the NBA at its worst.
Right. I want to point out too, when you miss a three, if you take a step back three and it's 30 feet out or something like that, and it's a terrible shot early in the shot clock, and it back rims and it goes to the other team, I don't care if it doesn't show up on the stat sheet as a turnover. That's a turnover. That is a turnover on possession. You gave the other team the ball with that stupid shot. And I want to point out with Doncic too, he is best when he's getting in the seams and taking advantage of the team's weak, like basically taking advantage of the rules, taking advantage of weak inside D when he's drawing fouls that way without trying to sell it constantly, and when he plays within himself. But the moment he turns into a James Harden type clone is when the Clippers blow him out in the first quarter.
Absolutely. Because it gets to a point psychologically where you feel that you have to make things happen instead of approaching psychologically, okay, as a team, we're going to do this together. I'm going to lead the way, but if I see there's an opportunity there for you, I'm going to allow you to take it or even dish the rock. And in that monster game, I want you to pay attention to the amount of assists he had, while scoring the points and grabbing rebounds. Players sometimes get into a rhythm by distributing the basketball, by passing the rock, by looking for opportunities for others. It's surprising how that could free them up psychologically to know that I'm not the only one scoring the basketball, and it gives you the opportunity to literally get loose out there on the court. And Luka Doncic is that type of player. Although young, he kind of reminds you of a Magic Johnson type of player. Magic Johnson sometimes would not even look for opportunities for himself. Magic Johnson would get into a rhythm by dishing the ball out.
Well, Magic Johnson could have averaged 30 points per game if he wanted to. When he needed to, as we noticed in his rookie year, when he needed to, he would put up big points in a big game if he had to. But his goal was to get everybody happy.
Exactly. You know why? Because there was a respect for his teammates. There was a respect for the veterans, a genuine, deep-rooted respect to understand that I am the new guy here, and it's my responsibility to give them their opportunities. And then we talked about how these hardcore veterans are being kind of like pushed out, and that respect is not always there. You know what I mean? It was just a different system back then. No matter how talented you were as a rookie, you still made sure that the veterans got their opportunities, and it made them better players as a result, in my opinion.
Right. And the league, on that point, the league is basically the youngest it's ever been right now, or at least tied for it. It's roughly age 26. So, yeah, it's crazy. And a lot of teams in a youth movement. Last note on Doncic before we move on. He doesn't turn 22 until February 28th of next year. And he was the first round third pick in the 2018 NBA draft. So next talking point, I wanted to go over the Celtics versus Raptors. Both swept their first round series. That was expected from the Raptors because they were playing the undermanned Brooklyn Nets. Kind of wanted to see Jamal Crawford a little bit more in the game. He's one of my favorite Twitter followers. He didn't get to play much in that series. So the Raptors did what they were expected to do. Then the Celtics sweep the Philadelphia 76ers, who were without Ben Simmons, but they had their offseason acquisitions. Otherwise, they were healthy. Joel Embiid was playing. He was a little bit banged up, but he was playing. They had Tobias Harris. They had Josh Richardson. They had Al Horford, who really took a lot of heat from the 76ers fans. And I like Al as a guy, so that's, I expected that, though, because the 76ers fans can do that. They can be like that. But, before we move on to the Celtics, Joel Embiid has to be one of the most frustrating players I've ever watched play basketball.
Yeah.
And, I heard rumblings of comparing him to Hakeem Olajuwon, trying to put his numbers up to Hakeem Olajuwon, all of that stuff. That is a major insult to Hakeem Olajuwon. Joel Embiid is a lot slower. He doesn't even have close to the mid-range and extended mid-range repertoire that Hakeem Olajuwon had. Eldridge Rakasner, a teammate of Hakeem Olajuwon, by the way, on Twitter said that Hakeem smoked threes in practice. Like, Hakeem was a fantastic, capable three-point shooter, but the NBA was different at the time. I can guarantee you that Hakeem could shoot at or above at least the percentage that Joel Embiid shoots from threes, but the game was different. But the comparison bothered me a little bit, but Joel Embiid is so frustrating, and Shaq mentioned this on NBA on TNT. With his size, in this NBA where most teams play small ball, where the offense is at such an advantage, he should be rim running, going right to the front of the rim and being able to finish over the top of these defenses. But I continually see him, stepping out and shooting fadeaways, or standing at the top of the key shooting threes, or not going up strong in the lane and getting stopped by James Harden and smaller players. And I'm watching this guy play, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And Shaq was saying the same type of stuff. It's like, how do you not use your size in this NBA effectively? And why are you never in shape? And why are you so slow? Like, he just looked slow through the entire first round series. So I wanted to get your take real quick before we move on to the Celtics on Joel Embiid. What is the deal?
This is a hard-nosed conversation, and to me, I think it's a commentary upon the state of the big man in the NBA, which was a controversial discussion, but it still needs to be had. We need to have this discussion, because if you're going to make a comparison to Hakeem Olajuwon, then you need to know the soul of Hakeem Olajuwon, a true competitor on both ends of the court.
In the discussion for most elite two-way player in NBA history. He's
absolutely. And you're talking about a guy who, in today's NBA, and I'm glad you're going to discuss that from 94 and 95 season, who could dominate. Hakeem Olajuwon, arguably, is one of my most favorite players in NBA history because of what I've witnessed from him in redefining the style of the big man. Joel Embiid, come on. His effort is inconsistent. He appears to be.
He won.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Come on. Of course. He appears to be relatively skillful, but not in the areas of where it matters the most, with him being that true source of offensive power in the paint on a consistent level. Once again, having reliable skill-based moves to use at his advantage whenever he notices a mismatch. He doesn't have that. Whereas Hakeem Olajuwon knew methodically, strategically, exactly what he was going to do based upon the matchup he received. It doesn't matter. It did not matter where it was on the floor, whether it was on the perimeter or down low. He knew exactly, as a result of his skill, what to do to be effective during those moments. What you have with Joel Embiid, because of his mindset, not because of his ability physically, his mindset not to compete consistently, you see him take the lazy way out. And the three-point shot, perimeter shot, is the easiest way to go.
Nothing's easier. They talk about the evolution of the game, and somehow the evolution of the game and the peak of the NBA now is moving further away from the basket. We have the most athletes in the world. This is the most athletic the NBA has ever been, but yet the average team is attempting 35 to 40 threes a game. We're seeing 70 to 80 hoisted up every game. Players aren't attacking the paint. Other players are making business decisions so they don't get posterized, etc.
Right.
Like, don't tell me this is the peak of the NBA when you're making it so one-dimensional and you're moving further away from the basket.
Absolutely. In my opinion, if you're going to call this the peak of the NBA, then it's simply something that I am invested in watching, and it's for a new generation. To me, anything is at its peak when you have multiple facets of skill, when you have multiple interpretations upon how you play the game. And like you said, in my opinion, and I have to agree wholeheartedly with you, and those who are senior veterans of watching the NBA, from multiple generations can also agree to this as well, that today's game requires a new type of skill, particularly for big men. But it doesn't require, let's say, it doesn't require how can I best put it?
Footwork the same way that it did. It doesn't require the same use of your size.
Exactly.
It doesn't require the same uses of your body and your strength and your repertoire, like stuff like that. When a guy like Vin Baker came into the league, he had all the skill in the world. People, listen, you may remember Celtics, overweight, out of shape Vin Baker, but go back and watch Vin Baker when he first came into the league. Name more skilled post players than Vin Baker when he first came in to the NBA. As far as like comparing to now.
Correct.
So yeah, I completely agree. I'm going to move on though, in the sake of time. And you and I are going to get on another show at some point because this conversation has been great, and as I knew it would be. So Celtics versus Raptors. Losing Gordon Hayward is a big deal for the Celtics.
Huge.
As it gives the Celtics one less ball handler, one less efficient scorer, gives the team overall less versatility on defense and on offense. Hayward has the ability to play 3 different positions. He's a forward guard. He can definitely bring up the ball. He's a great passer in the half court. He often excels as a floor general and a leader. They still have pieces to get the job done. However, I am worried about consistency on defense, as we always seem to have those periods in games where the team will go, our opponent will go on a run, and we basically just look like we've lost all effort. Like we don't have the same intensity, et cetera. And that's really frustrating to watch in today's game in general. And like I said, it's mainly from an effort and sacrifice standpoint that I'm worried, not from as much of a defensive versatility point of view. But there is one thing I'd like to see more from the Celtics in the Raptors series if the situation calls for it. If we need that energy, if we need somebody to come in and disrupt, and I'm not talking about Marcus Smart. He brings it every game. If we need somebody to come in, I'd like to see Robert Williams get a few more minutes. And I would like to see Romeo Langford on the floor just scrap. I want to see him disrupt. I want to see Fred VanVleet get uncomfortable. I want to see Kyle Lowry fall to the floor and cry like he usually does and not get the call. I want to see – he's one of my worst – I can't stand watching him play basketball. But and Marcus Smart flops at times, but he doesn't complain even close to as much as Kyle Lowry, and he doesn't have the same whiny face. I just want to point that out. So I think that what scares me as far as the Raptors go is they usually have more intensity and more consistency on the defensive end and are equally versatile to the Celtics. As much as I can't stand Kyle Lowry's flopping and crying on the floor, he is a disruptor on both ends and can frustrate defenses and cause foul trouble.
I have to agree. And if there's one coach who can get it done, is Coach Stevenson. I will say that his mind for the game and his ability to make adjustments whenever there appears to be any item of shorthandedness or disadvantage, he finds a chemical mixture there that ends up finding his team competing. So in matters of your consideration for Robert Langford and on those others who may not be on the floor as often, I am pretty sure Coach Stevenson will help to define roles for them, so that at the very least,
they have a lot of depth. They have to use the young guys.
Yes.
Swag.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and Robert Williams is a 6'8" center, but I am not opposed to giving the Raptors a different look and throwing Tice at the center and getting Robert Williams at the power forward. Tice doesn't play in the paint a lot anyway. In fact, Tice usually he's setting screens at the top of the key. He's rolling off. I want to kill him when he doesn't shoot that wide open mid-range shot. He doesn't even look at the hoop. I hate it when he gets that pick and pop and he just doesn't shoot it. But Robert Williams is a quick, agile, fast, young, power forward center that I think can, we saw what he could do in the Brooklyn game. Sure, Brooklyn's not a great team, but seeing him roll to the hoop and attack defenses is a beauty to watch. And I think that he's gotten a little bit smarter. He's a little bit more mature, and I think he's ready for a few more minutes. But I'll say again, if Tice continues to pass up those shots and we continue to pass up those shots in the mid-range, when I see Tatum in there and I see Kemba in there and I see Jaylen Brown from 15 feet from the hoop and they have a wide open look and they'll either pass it off or they'll try to attack two people, listen, take the damn shot.
Absolutely.
And because you're bailing out the defense at that point. And sorry to go off on a tangent, but once Tice makes that shot, let's say he's guarded by Marc Gasol. Once Tice makes that 15 to 18 footer, what happens? Marc Gasol has to come out of the paint.
You have to be
He
honest.
has to come up on Daniel Tice, and he has to. And what does that do? That leaves the paint open. That gives more opportunities for cutters. That gives you more opportunity for basically, points in the paint in general. So I think, and it also gives you more of an opportunity for switches, right? Because you can now have Marc Gasol away from the basket, and now you can run something out on the perimeter. So please, Celtics, Coach Stevens, you won't be listening to this podcast, but if you ever did, please put pressure on the defense in all different spots on the floor, and don't do what you did in 2018 and shoot yourselves out of a series like you did against the Cavs.
Hey, there it is. I mean, I hope he does listen. And I think I called him Stevenson, but I'm sorry. But, because in my opinion, I can't disagree with what you're stating. You got to give the players the liberty to feel comfortable taking opportunities when it's there, even if they're unsuccessful, because at some point you're going to find a rhythm there. You're going to find a groove, and it's going to be developed in there. And I think, more so than ever is the time for that. You have a significant loss there with Gordon Hayward. Everybody on some level have to be able to compete and contribute out there on the floor, even if it doesn't include buckets. At least add some level of intensity to where all players matter. And like I said, I have more than confidence in Coach Stevens, to get this done, because he's shown the capacity in the past to do it, and I believe he can do it again. And literally, if you was to be right beside him, that would be, as an assistant coach, I know he would heavily consider that. And literally at this point, there's no choice. You really have to kind of compensate for what is lost. And with the loss of Gordon Hayward, that's going to take about 2 or 3 players coming off the bench to provide that mixture of contribution that Gordon Hayward would otherwise provide if he was still available. So yeah, that is, in my opinion, the absolute recipe for success, is to find these players, find where they can contribute, and do so on a consistent level. So at the very least, they can compete out there on the floor against the Raptors, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And one final note before we move on to the Lakers. I get these weird 06-07 Mavericks vibes from the Toronto Raptors this year. Of course, the 06-07 Mavericks lost to the Golden State Warriors after winning 60 games during the regular season. They, the We Believe Warriors, they lost to them in the first round. I get this very weird overachieving feel from the Toronto Raptors, and don't think I'm just saying that because I grew up a Celtics fan. They don't have the they play a nice offense. Nick Nurse has a nice offense there. They have a lot of movement. They pick their spots well and whatnot, but they don't have that shot creator in the clutch. The Dallas Mavericks did in Jason Terry and Dirk Nowitzki, and even Josh Howard at times back in 06-07. But where I'm drawing that comparison is an overachieving regular season team that I do think is going to bounce in the playoffs. So that's just my opinion. I see that with them. I do think that they have good pieces, and the worst thing that can possibly happen for the Celtics is them to basically allow the Raptors to get comfortable early in games, and that's kind of what I'm worried about. So that's on that series. I do think the Celtics take it in 6. So that's my prediction. Do you have a prediction for that series?
I do believe that the Celtics will ultimately be victorious in this series. Because of the remaining talent that is still out there on the floor. They do have individuals they can go to with every possession to provide some level of contribution offensively, and they have enough pieces there defensively to really mix things up if Coach Stevens use those, resources that were otherwise not being used in the past, to even go in there to just scrap, to just disrupt, to go out there and say, hey, you can go out there and commit three or 4 fouls. Just make sure that they do not feel comfortable in their system.
Right. You have to use Romeo Langford as a goon. Right. If you have to use Romeo Langford to come in and get up 2 or 3 physical fouls and then just take him out of the game, do it.
Yeah, do it. Exactly.
They had those guys in the 80s, the disrupt. Greg Kite for the
Yep.
Celtics, the 85-86 championship Celtics. Greg Kite, what did he come and do? He came in and he was a goon. He would come in, he'd get physical with the big guys. He'd put his body on the line. He'd get some fouls. He'd get some bad stares. He'd get some boos from the fans, and then he'd go home.
There you go. Absolutely. So I have to agree with your consideration. I kind of want to make a bolder prediction that the Celtics can take this in 5 if Coach Stevens finds that recipe of success. And this just all it takes for him is one remarkable game, and then he got it figured out. He knows exactly what he needs to do. So I could potentially see the Celtics taking this in 5.
Yeah, I think, and final note on that, one of the biggest things for me when I watch the games is I get really frustrated in these long droughts where Tatum and Jaylen Brown and Kemba Walker don't put pressure on the defense going to the hoop. So I want you to mix up your offense, but you need to attack the hoop. Get Marc Gasol out of there. And even if Marc Gasol's in there, what would be better than getting him in foul trouble as
Perfect.
well? Or, putting the pressure on Siakam and making him pick up a couple, quick ones and whatnot. So please keep the pressure, keep going to the hoop. So last topic as far as the main discussion would be the Lakers. So this is, again, you're a basketball fan since 1991, Lakers fan since 1991. What happened in 1991? Well, the 1991 season, the Lakers lost to the Bulls in the finals in 5 games. But you got to see Magic Johnson come back in 95, 96. You got to see multiple championships with Kobe and Shaq. You got to see championships later on with Kobe and Pa, etc. So you definitely have a lot to cheer for. You've had a lot to cheer for over the years. What do you see in this Lakers team outside of obviously having size? What do you see in this Lakers team that could possibly get them to the title?
I see a team that's slightly out of sort, but have a mindset to kind of get things done. I was literally impressed with how they competed against Portland after that game 1 loss. And with their poor shooting, they found a way to get it done. There is a will there. There is a will there. There's a drive there that I cannot quite put to words. That gives them the ability to literally contend for the ring. And in mention of comparison of the great teams that I've witnessed in the past, sometimes it's a bit shaky for me in evaluating them. With the ups and downs.
With all the agendas too.
Exactly, and of course.
The NBA covers them in the way, they're seemingly always on the free throw line at times. I'm going to use an example of the game. Series specifically. All the attention around LeBron James. Oh, forget Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis doesn't exist. Anthony Davis can lead this team in almost all categories. Anthony Davis, when he's not going to be a defensive player of the year either. Who's Anthony Davis? And whatnot. So it's definitely hard to evaluate them.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Because you're just having this central focus upon one player. There are times where you don't even know Anthony Davis is there, but he is, and he's there in every game. And his contribution have been magnanimous. And in my opinion, like you stated, it's been an understatement upon
best
how
scorer and best defensive player. Best scorer and best defensive player on that team. But go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, by any means, I'm in full concurrence with what you're stating. And I think that's what it is right now. With the media projection of the Lakers state versus what is actually taking its place on the court, you would feel as if the Lakers are less significant than what they are. But when they go out there as a team and as a unit, you see that they're actually a force to be reckoned with. Especially when they're floating, when they're just literally getting things done on all cylinders. But when there are breakdowns, they are quite significant. But the thing in this playoffs is those breakdowns won't last for 4 consecutive games to where you'll take them out. They will eventually come back and recognize who they are, not in spite of what others are saying they are. They know who they are and what they're capable of doing. And for any team in the NBA right now to take them out in 4 consecutive games is a daunting task because it's just too many forces out there on the court to compete with, especially Anthony Davis.
An example of that, is Game 4 versus Portland. Just to run through a few numbers here, and if you watch the game, it was disgustingly easy for them to score, and it makes you question Portland's intensity on that end and their competence on that end. So LeBron was 10 for 12, of course, barreling down the lane. He also hit 4 3-pointers during that game. He was 4 for 5. Danny Green 5 for 8. Caldwell Pope 5 for 8. Anthony Davis 5 for 8. JaVale McGee 4 for 6. Dwight Howard 5 for 7. Kyle Kuzma 6 for 12. So the run down those field goal percentages from top to bottom: 84%, 63%, 63%, 63%, 67%, 71%, 50%. When you have that easy of a time scoring, and I want to point this out, if you guys think that the Rockets are going to do any better, you're nuts. I will completely admit if I'm wrong, but the two best players on this team as far as scoring the ball, when Anthony Davis actually plays the way he's supposed to, when he plays mid and in, are LeBron James and Anthony Davis. And LeBron James barrels down the lane. He's one of the biggest guys in the league, and he's always challenged by an undersized player who has to put his arms up and backpedal because he can't put his hands on LeBron, and LeBron will just score. That's just the way it is. LeBron is a notoriously bad shooter, basically, for his career overall. He's around 35% outside the paint for his career. But where his bread and butter is in this small NBA. Remember, I talk about matchups, right? In this small NBA with the defense handicapped by the rules, he can just lower his head and get to the rim. And who on Houston is stopping that? Nobody. And nobody's competing with Anthony Davis's size and his touch around the rim either. So again, if you think those percentages I gave you were wild, I wouldn't be surprised to see that a few times in a Rocket series. Oh,
absolutely. Matter of fact, we could just move on to the next topic because
yeah. So for the listeners, just to let you know, I'm trying to keep the show a little bit shorter because I did 2.5 hours on the first show. So we are on our last couple topics. So why don't we move to the mailbag?
Awesome. This is fun.
No, I'm having a good time. So let's go with the mailbag. So this is going to be the first question. And this comes from Hoop Guru at hoopguru24_33. He said, at their absolute peak, who do you think is the greatest winner in NBA history? And why? And the bottom line is, and I know this is the easy answer, and it's not just about championships, but it is Bill Russell. You'll go over his accolades real quick. Hall of Fame, 12-time All-Star, 11-time NBA champ, 4-time rebound champ, which is unbelievable. If you look at his rebound totals, he'd be the rebound champ every year today. 11-time All-NBA, 62-63 All-Star MVP, 5-time MVP, stayed with the same franchise his whole career. He gave the game and his team exactly what it needed. People will look at field goal percentage, but they don't know what went into that and how his shot selection was utilized. All offense is also passing, rebounding, screens, picks, spacing. There was so much more to offense than scoring, and he was way more to offense than scoring. But when he needed to score, he would get the job done. Right. All of those skills, his athleticism at 6'10", they translate to any era of basketball. He would be one of the quickest, fastest, and most athletic big men in the NBA today, in my opinion. He would score double figures today on putbacks and drop downs alone, especially with how open the paint is and how active he was and his great hands. He had an ability to hit unblockable hook shots, instant separation shots. He had, mid-tweener shots. I've shown video of that on YouTube on Twitter. And, there's nobody who impacted winning on both ends of the floor the way that Bill Russell did. He also had the ability to be a one-man fast break. His ability, like McHale, and like I talked about with James Worthy recently, to not bring the ball down and just catch and finish over the defense. There's many highlights showing that. His timing. I think that in any era, Bill Russell is a legend, and he's going to be a champion. And he went against Titans. He went against Wilt Chamberlain. He went against Willis Reed, Nate Thurman, Walt Bellamy, Bob Pettit. He went through especially in the 60s, he went through a lot of great Titan big men. And the thing that people don't talk about is he was playing these guys 9 to 10 times a season, because there were so few teams. And then in the playoffs, he was playing them more at times. There was one season where he matched up with Wilt Chamberlain 15 times.
Wow.
15 times. So people say, oh, well, the competition wasn't what it was today and blah, blah, blah. There were less teams. Less teams meant you had to play these dominant, great big guys far more. You know what I mean? You weren't playing, and no offense to him, but, you weren't playing somebody like Thomas Bryant, multiple times a year the same way. And players that, are not considered great or elite players. And Russell was doing this, playing great centers almost on a nightly basis. Also, a smaller league means more talent. Now, imagine if the NBA today had 8 teams. Imagine putting the talent we have in the NBA today on 8 teams.
Wow.
That's something crazy to think about. So, again, I wanted to make that point. Russell not being in the GOAT conversation and the greatest player of all time debate is absolutely ridiculous. Same with Kareem not being in it, Bird and Magic, etc.
Right.
Jordan LeBron GOAT debate is fabricated by the media because it has made everybody feel like they can talk hoop. That's the purpose of it. It makes everybody feel like an expert, that they can pick a side and debate it using the same casual takes made by the said media. This is, again, by design. It promotes the current product because you have LeBron in it, and it gets everybody involved. And somehow Russell, Kareem, Bird, Magic have somehow been pushed aside in order to make the short attention span population focus on just 2 players. Because it's much easier to control the information and people that way. Honorable mentions and people that could also be talked about: Kobe, Hakeem, Shaq, Tim Duncan in the same era, etc. So
absolutely, and I'm a little bit pressed for time because I do have to get ready for work. But I want to say at this moment that I genuinely appreciate you having me on this podcast. And it's been a true honor to be here discussing basketball with you, an item that I truly love, an item that literally brings the nostalgia out of me. And what you said about Bill Russell is just absolutely true. Right now, we just get caught up in the modernization of the game that we forget to remember that these players of today have science and technology that's supposed to promote health and have them recover faster. These guys back then did not have half the resources that these athletes have of today. We're talking about game psychologists, masseuse therapists, icing, and all these advanced ways to heal. Right. And these players literally figured it out on their own. You're talking about Bernard King limping out there just to show support for his team.
That's guts. We need more guts in the NBA now. That's and that's the funny part is you can have all of these advancements, quote unquote, but the product is not better. I don't find the product better.
I mean, what a defining moment to talk about the sense of pride and responsibility that you had, not just for yourself, but for others. And that's where I feel the NBA is missing. And it's in that type of passion that just resonate with the fans. I mean, the amount of noise in the Garden that occurred after he made that shot, literally struggling to go up and down the court. There aren't any moments that are more iconic in representing the true theme of basketball than that.
Same thing with Willis Reed, Kevin McHale playing on a broken foot.
Exactly.
That's right.
Yes. Yeah. So, you can talk about talent, but talent does not always translate to passion.
Right.
And passion, strong enough supersedes talent any day.
There's a lot of passion on this podcast, so it's good.
Exactly. Dee, thank you so very much. I'm so sorry that I couldn't be here until its completion, but please continue. And I look forward to joining you in future podcasts as well.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for coming on. For anybody else, follow SwaggyPlino on Twitter. He's a good friend of mine. And thanks for coming on to the show.
Thank you, brother. It's been an honor, man. Keep it up.
Definitely. See ya.
See ya.
All right, so we're going to continue the show. So let me finish up here with this, answering this question. For Bill Russell, him never being mentioned by the media in the debate, even though he is the winningest player in NBA history, the greatest defender in NBA history, and the ultimate leader, team champion. They just can't mention Bill because they need you focused on LeBron, and they also need you focused on Jordan. So I just wanted to bring that up, and obviously LeBron's included because he's going to promote the Now product. So let's get to the next mailbag question. What player from 1984 to 1995 would be greater today than they were? And no, I'm not talking about tier one, the Birds, MJs, and Magic. This comes from AlexRay33 at AlexRay33 over on Twitter. And I made a list of names that I think that actually would be better than they were in the Now NBA. Reggie Miller, Dale Ellis, Abdul Rauf, Mitch Richmond, Chris Mullin, Ralph Sampson, Reggie Lewis, Mark Price, Larry Johnson, Kenny Smith, Cliff Robinson, Detlef Schrempf, Penny Hardaway, Dan Marley, Kevin McHale, Byron Scott, etc. So that's just a really short list of names off the top of my head. If you noticed, you had quite a few shooters on there. You had Reggie Miller, Dale Ellis, Abdul Rauf. They had to play against much better defense, especially in the early 90s, which is probably the best defense I've ever seen in the NBA. And look what they were able to do with that. At one point, Dale Ellis actually averaged 27 points per game, Miller around 24. But imagine them putting up the number of threes that are put up today. Imagine Dale Ellis being put on an island and being able to shoot that many threes. Imagine Abdul Rauf, as Phil Jackson had stated, comparing him to Curry. Imagine Abdul Rauf with his quick release and his competence behind the three-point line. Imagine Abdul Rauf having that freedom in today's NBA. I think you saw Trae Young average about 30 points per game this year. Why wouldn't Abdul Rauf be able to do that? His ability to shoot, his ability to shoot off balance, his continuous attack, why not? Mitch Richmond, obvious choices, Chris Mullin, Ralph Sampson, because who's going to guard him today? One of the most versatile big men that I've ever seen play. Who's going to guard Ralph Sampson in today's NBA? Because he could literally do it all. He would be a nightmare in the paint. He would be even better than he was back then. Reggie Lewis, a great two-way player. You see guys like Kawhi Leonard and Paul George talked about as stars today. How do you think Reggie Lewis would be talked about? Go back and watch Reggie Lewis. Go back and watch his two-way play, the way he locked down defenders, how active he was on defense, his mid-range game, the way he attacked the hoop. Reggie Lewis would be possibly in that same discussion. Mark Price, obvious. Larry Johnson, the way he'd be able to barrel down the lane untouched. I see him being even better today. Kenny Smith, on a recent discussion, stated that he might be able to average 25 points per game in today's NBA, and he got a ton of flack for it. The bottom line is I agree with him. I think that Kenny Smith, with today's spacing, the amount of wide open looks he would have, I think that Kenny Smith would be able to average far more than he did back then today. Cliff Robinson, Detlef Schrempf. People talk about Siakam. Siakam's about 6'9". Cliff Robinson was 6'10". Detlef Schrempf 6'10". Both incredibly versatile forwards. Both could step out and hit the three. Both could put the ball on the floor. I see both of them being better. Penny Hardaway, obvious reasons. Dan Marley. And who's going to stop Kevin McHale today? Who's going to stop Kevin McHale, who never brought the ball down in this 4-out, 5-out, undersized NBA? Who is going to stop Kevin McHale in the mid? Who's going to stop him around the basket? Who's going to stop him even on the boards in today's game? He would just be a matchup nightmare, and I think that he could be an MVP candidate in today's NBA. So let's move on to the worst Twitter takes of the week.
What?
So I want to actually bring attention to a couple as we're running short on time. So Spencer Dinwiddie, and this actually happened on May 2nd, but I wanted to shine light on it. He said, and just for added context, I definitely think MJ had the best prime NBA years of all time, and that Kareem is the basketball GOAT. But you all thought MJ was a god in the 80s and 90s because he was 6'6" with a 40. I'm 6'6" with a 40 in 2020, and you all think I'm unathletic. My biggest problem with this statement by Spencer Dinwiddie is nobody thought MJ was a god in the 80s and 90s because of his leaping ability alone. And first off, MJ had about a 48-inch vertical. Spencer Dinwiddie said with a 40, and he never backtracked it either. He never went back and said, oh, you're right, I'm wrong. He didn't have a 40, it was a 48. Not only that, I didn't find any evidence of Spencer Dinwiddie having a 40-inch vertical either, so that's up in the air as well. That's him just saying it. And he already lied in the previous statement, so you never know. The other point is, did he forget that Clyde Drexler was in the NBA, that Dominique Wilkins was in the NBA, that Larry Nance was in the NBA dunking with his head over the rim, that Gerald Wilkins was in the NBA? There were a ton of great leapers. Daryl Griffith, Dr. Duncanstein, not to mention the bigs who were leaping out of the building. It is a terrible statement, and to me, it shows, again, how current NBA players don't know their history, or need to brush up on their history and whatnot. I think that it's a shame, to be completely honest, because these players from the past need to be appreciated. They deserve to be appreciated, and they deserve to be talked about in the proper context. So the other worst Twitter take that I chose was Max Kellerman. He said on August 26th, on First Take, he stated that he thinks that Donovan Mitchell and Jamal Murray is a rivalry that could become the new Bird and Magic. And he said, this is his quote, "This is the only real rivalry right now in my mind in the NBA." And so first off, you calling that the only real rivalry in the NBA, what does that say about today's game? If a first-round series where Donovan Mitchell and Jamal Murray go at each other for a couple games and have high-scoring affairs is the new rivalry and the only real rivalry in the NBA. That means it's a sad state in the NBA, honestly. Number two, anybody calling Donovan Mitchell and Jamal Murray a rivalry right now based on just a couple games of going at each other in a first-round series, to be completely honest with you, should not be talking sports. They shouldn't be talking basketball. So I'll say again, as far as Max Kellerman goes, that is an absolutely terrible take. He added on that Clyde was no real rival for Jordan. Jordan was just too good. That is also something I disagree with. Clyde Drexler was the second best shooting guard in the NBA almost his entire career. And he made it to the 1992 finals and faced off with Jordan as well. And Jordan, even in that series, felt he took it personally, because there were still people out there that said that Clyde Drexler was challenging him for that shooting guard title, the best shooting guard. So that's Max just not knowing his history. Yes, Jordan was a superior player to Clyde Drexler. Yes, Jordan won 3 championships and then came back and won another 3 and whatnot. But to say that Clyde Drexler was no real rival to Jordan in the same conversation where he says Donovan Mitchell and Jamal Murray is a rivalry, again, you shouldn't be talking basketball. He also said that Bird and Magic were a rivalry and they met each other in the finals and elevated each other's games. Well, obviously Donovan Mitchell and Jamal Murray wouldn't be able to do that as they're in the same conference. So there's that. So that's it. So that is episode 2 of Holding Court with Dee4three. Thank you for joining. Connect with me on Twitter at Dee4three84. Also on YouTube, Dee4three. And also tune in to CLNS Media as well. So thanks for tuning in, and I hope to see you again for episode 3.